Patients come to see us for their headache and migraine. One thing that often they comment about is the fact that when they start improving with their headache and migraine by treating the neck, why they haven't heard about this earlier, why their doctor hasn't mentioned it, why their physio, their osteo, their chiro, or other health professional hasn't mentioned that the neck may be a cause. Well, today I'm going to give you the 3 reasons why. They're all totally understandable. It's not their fault, but just to give you a bit of an idea of the context around the headache and migraine world that we live in. So the first reason is actually a really obvious one when you think about it. So when we talk about headaches and migraines, what we're talking about are a whole bunch of conditions that are defined symptomatically in a diagnostic manual that is used by neurologists and doctors worldwide. Okay, the 3rd edition of this manual came out a couple of years ago, and basically it splits the types of headaches and migraines into primary headaches and secondary headaches. So today what I'm talking about are the primary headaches. So the secondary headaches, just so you know, are those that have concussion, blood pressure, all sorts of other issues that you can actually look at, scan and define and have an actual, I can look at it, see it on a scan, reason for the migraine or headache being there. But primary headaches, like your headaches, your migraines, tension headaches, cluster headaches, there's nothing on the scan. The scans come back clear. So why is it that the neck isn't sort of mentioned with these primary type headaches? Well, the reason's very simple. The neck just isn't mentioned in the diagnostic manual when it comes to those conditions, unfortunately. So those conditions are all diagnosed symptomatically, okay? So stabbing behind the eye, runny nose and all the rest of it, that's your cluster headache. One-sided, 24 to 72 hours, completely reversible neurological symptoms, that's a migraine with aura. Okay, but it doesn't actually mention anything about the causes. Now, the reason why they split all of these different headache types into different categories, if you like, is so that researchers can study people with all similar characteristics to see if there are any drug treatments that can actually help them out. So the reason why doctors and neurologists actually diagnose you under these classification guidelines is to find a medication or some kind of medical treatment that might actually assist. But what we now know is that the neck can actually contribute input into the part of the brain that causes headaches and migraines to happen. So funnily enough, it's actually why Botox can work sometimes, because they're actually jabbing Botox into the neck. So it's having a very similar effect to what our thumbs would when you're actually jabbing it with Botox. Of course, there are downsides to it, which I won't go into in this video, but they are there, and it's doing practically the same thing, I think, with the way that this is all working. So reason number 1, the diagnostic classification manual doesn't actually mention the neck, and that's why it's not actually mentioned in the medical setting. Now, the second thing actually extends from this, is that the doctors and other health professionals, physios included, actually don't have a very long time studying headache and migraine at university. In fact, there was actually a paper that came out talking about the very small amount of time that doctors spend studying headache and migraine in their undergraduate studies, despite it being the #1 disabling neurological condition on the planet. So on average, it's only about 3 or 4 hours that's spent in those lecture theatres talking about headache and migraine conditions. And then after that, there's not really a lot more that's really spoken about it unless they start to do more specialised study, or they see more and more headache and migraine patients and go down the rabbit hole on their own. So if they're starting from a base where headache and migraine is defined by that classification manual, they're not spending a lot of time actually reading up more about this and only taking the words of the different drug manufacturers, the different research papers that are coming out of those fields as treatment methods for headache and migraine, then of course the neck is not going to be really considered, because they're human. They're going to be looking at what's most recent, what they know in their own sphere of influence. So it's totally understandable that they might not recommend the neck be looked at, but it is something that does need to be looked at. The third reason is actually going to solve the first 2. And the fact of the matter is, it doesn't matter who you are, whether you're a doctor, a physio, a chiro, osteopath, even a lawyer, a teacher, it doesn't really matter too much who you are. everybody's human. So everyone is biased towards what they've heard about recently. They're biased towards their own field of knowledge, and they're biased towards the bright, shiny new object. It's really, really hard to get past these biases. And so what can happen, and what you guys can do at home if you've actually had a really good result with your headache and migraine by getting their neck treated, is actually tell people about it. Tell your GP that, hey, look, remember when we used to have a lot of prescriptions for codeine or Migraine or these sorts of things, but now we're not. And the reason why is because we got our neck treated, and the neck has decreased the migraines and headaches by a quite significant, quite substantial amount. Now, this of course is not a very scientific thing, it's only anecdotes and things of that nature, but the sad fact is in medicine that when it comes to new research, it takes on average about 15 years from idea to research, and then another 15 years from research to be mainstream knowledge. If you want to have a look at the impacts of this, you can have a look at poor old Schimmelweiss's studies back in the 1800s about hand washing in hospitals to talk about that. If you want to Google that, it's quite worth your while. But certainly when it comes to headache and migraine and the role of the neck, I think this is what we're seeing at the moment. We have known that the neck has contributed to headache and migraine over the years, but there just hasn't been the money or the research that's been done into the neck's role in headache and migraine, because frankly, you can't reproduce it easily in a factory. You can't produce headache and migraine drugs with hands on necks and things of that nature. So it's taken a long, long time to actually get to this point. But with your help and your support, your sharing of your knowledge, everyone getting their treatment from their physios, their chiros, there is more and more upswell of support for this hypothesis, this theory, because people are actually getting better from getting their necks treated from headache and migraine. Now, does that mean everyone gets better? No, of course not, because it's always going to be more complicated than that. But what you can do is, if you've had a very good experience with your headache and migraine by getting your neck treated, whether it's by us, whether it's by physios, chiros, osteos, whoever it might be, then talk about it with your peers, talk about it with your friends, talk about it with your doctor, because the only way that these sorts of things do get traction in the first place is for more people to know about it, for more funding to come from governments, for more funding to come from other sources to actually get the recognition that this deserves. And that only serves to help patients moving forward. So I know there's been a pretty deep video today, but that's basically the way that things are in the headache and migraine field. If you've got any questions, any comments, please type in below. I'd be more than happy to either start a conversation with you privately or actually have a type in underneath in the comments as well. Can be a bit of an emotive sort of topic, can be quite controversial, but hey, I'm pretty open. What you see is what you get. I think there's actually a lot of improvement that can be done in the field of headache and migraine if we just have a look at the way that headaches and migraines are actually caused and not close our minds off to different things that may actually work for different populations of patients. I hope to see you again next time soon, and tune in again for the next Facebook Live video. Cheers and bye for now.